You've all heard the meme or the phrase, Linux is only free if you don't value your time. And this cliche keeps on popping up online and has even the potential to scare some people away from testing out Linux for themselves. And today we want to clear up the myth using facts and my own real-world experience after a decade of running Linux to assure you that you can indeed use Linux without losing your mind or wasting your time. Thanks for checking out this video by Switched to Linux. And if you do like this type of content, please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below. And indeed, we do want to talk about the origin of this particular meme. Of course, there's an excellent article here on balldogjob.com talking about the meme. Linux is only free if your time has no value. So this actually was quoted from Jamie Zawinski, who was a very big player in free and open source early on, founding of Mozilla, worked with the Netscape project, a lot of early things that he did a lot of great stuff in the open source world. And in 1998, he happened to do an interview where he had been using Linux almost exclusively. And in that interview, he actually said that it just took so much time. He took 3 weeks to get the X driver to work with his monitor at 640 by 400 resolution. Now, before you think, wow, that's horrible, that was actually a fairly standard resolution at that time. Now, Windows did a little bit better, 1080 by 1024, although if you were running a monitor of that particular resolution, you had a really expensive computer. We got to stop and think back to 1998. I was in college. I was either doing Visual Basic or C++, depending on which semester it was. And, we had the computer labs. I think they still all had 95. I'm not sure we even had Windows 98 on the labs at that time. And, of course, some people were still running your Windows 3.1 on a DOS framework. So that's kind of the world we are in. Things like even processor chips weren't specifically standardized. There weren't pretty color cables on all of your cables, so you knew which hole to plug which wire into. We still had to deal with serial ports on printers, and a lot of really custom hardware was coming out to cover basic things. I mean, I remember I had a scanner in those days. I had a scanner that had to have specific drivers. I think that used a printer port, so I had to manually pull the printer out to plug the scanner in if I wanted to scan something. I actually had one of the very first DVD drives for a computer. I had to buy a separate piece of hardware. I had to buy a decoder card for the DVD and the drive itself. So I had to have the drive in the computer and then an encoder card inside of it. That's the computer world at this time in 1998 when this phrase was uttered. And in that time, it was very true. Windows tended to work a little bit better because everybody knew about it. It had over a 90%, 80 or 90% market share at that time. And at that particular time, if there was a piece of custom hardware like a DVD player, they really only did drives for Windows. You had to figure out how to tinker and get it to work with something like Linux if it was even possible at all. So there indeed was a time that this meme was true. But what I want to talk about here is what did you need to do in those early days? You had to have workarounds for less supported common hardware. Wireless cards were wonky as they were introduced. Bluetooth rarely ever worked, and even some trackpads were messed up. Today, these are issues that by and large are solved. There are a few odd wireless cards that may not have the support you would like, but for the most part, people realize if a thing doesn't work, our product's just going to be, left out of the mix. Because the reality is, on Windows, you literally have to hunt down drivers for most of these things. On Linux, they're all baked into the kernel. You don't actually have to do a lot. Now, the issue here is that some old stories about fixing problems by hand stuck around, and even when things changed, the the community is still flustered by the number of old online solutions. So, for example, this one over here, if I can get rid of all this pop-up crap, Wi-Fi adapter is not working. How to troubleshoot 12 years ago. This one was modified 5 years ago. There you go. So we still have a lot of those old things there. Now, there's a question, should we take down some of these old things, leave them historical, or a lot of those things and solutions they're proposing are kind of still valid? I look back at some of the tutorials when I'm building some systems. Let me refresh my mind about how to do something I haven't done in a while, and I'm still reading an Ask Ubuntu article from a decade ago, but it still works. It's still valid. But maybe at some point in time we need to flag them. Now, I did encounter a couple of these things that were pretty old and were modified more recently. Looks like I had forgotten to pull one of those examples down. But the fact of the matter is, many of these memes are old leftovers from a time that Linux was not as good as it is today. They are funny, but like old Linux, they are indeed out of date. How Linux works today. Well, modern Linux systems install as quickly or actually way faster than Windows or even Mac. Now, of course, Mac, you're generally not going to be reinstalling Mac if you do need to. It doesn't take a ton of time, but it does take significant longer to install Mac OS on a computer than it does to install your average Linux distribution. Windows, just block out the day. You're going to have to install Windows, and then you're going to have to run about a day's worth of updates, and then you're going to somewhere in between here, you're going to be tracking down some drivers. It is true that modern Windows systems do include drivers for some hardware, but it is not nearly as many drivers as they do on Linux. So if you're looking around for those things, on Linux, you generally don't have to do that. Most common hardware is already included, even it down to porting your drive to a brand new computer. I did a video a couple months ago where I was around a pawn shop, and as I was out there, I see this MSI laptop for like $250 or something like that. I'm like, well, I've been thinking about wanting to upgrade my laptop anyway. And so I said, well, why don't I go ahead and do this? We'll pick this guy up. And of course, I was going from a i5 now to an i7, 8 gigs of RAM to 16 gigs of RAM on modern hardware. It's only like a 2 or 3 generation. I think it's only 2 generation old system there. I literally just took the hard drive in the original computer, I cloned it, popped the clone into the new drive. Now, that was one of the things that I had to mess around with for one specific factor, and that's that the modern processors, I forget which processor I had on that particular MSI, but they dropped the old legacy BIOS boot. And the old computer had legacy BIOS boot. I basically had to convert the system from the old way of doing booting to the new way. We'll talk more about that down below. But for the most part, everything worked once I got that system in there. I just had to run one system update, which automatically configured the hardware from the kernel that was not specifically active. In that case, it was actually the wireless card. When I first put it on there, it didn't detect the wireless networks. I'm like, uh-oh, did I buy a computer with an old card? Just ran a system update and boom, internet works. No big deal. That was all I needed to do. Just run an update and it was good. Now, a new user should use a distribution that is focused on new users and simplicity of design. It is true that there are indeed some Linux distributions out there that are going to be very difficult to use, and we would recommend not starting with those. I always tell people, rather than getting all bogged down and trying to decide for yourself, just start with Linux Mint. All right, just start with Linux Mint. It's going to be super easy. There are other easy options. MX Linux, Linux Lite, Zorin OS, even Ubuntu and Fedora can be good choices, although I generally would steer away from them in this modern era until you get a chance to play around with Linux a little bit more. As far as using Linux, it's no longer fighting with things. Most tasks on Linux just use simple apps and simple menus. You generally do not have to go into the command line for basics. Many distributions even have very simple applications that allow you to manage even more complicated elements of Linux that are usually relegated to the command line. There's things like fixing the BIOS boot menus and things like that generally you have had to go into the command line. Distributions like MX Linux, they have a single button click there to fix boot issues and stuff like that. And by and large, I find if I'm on Linux Mint, the only time I ever go into my terminal is when I want to do updates, which I usually do through the terminal anyway, because it's faster and easier and I can see faster what's going on. The GUI works just fine. It's just a matter of personal preference using it. But the point is, you do not have to do that. You can go right on in, click the little update button, and update your computer. As far as the basic distributions I recommend, they all have simple software managers, making adding extra programs easy. You find what you're looking for in the list, click install, and enter your password. As far as running your system updates, by and large, systems do not update your computer automatically. Most of them now are including opt-in options. If you want them to automatically download and install things in the background, you can do that. Any GNOME system can do that through the GNOME Software Center. You can set up packages or full system updates. You can set security or full feature upgrades as updating automatically on Linux Mint. My favorite, you can set up automatic updates if you want to. I personally don't do that, but you can if you want to. But for the most part, you'll get a notification there's an update, and it will let you choose the best time that you can push your updates. So what has been my experience using Linux after over a decade of playing around with this system? Well, first and foremost, out of the box, Linux handles everything I need to do. Basic web browsing, basic office work, listening to videos, or listening to music, watching videos. There's no issues anymore. There were issues a long time ago. I remember a decade ago having conversations with a friend who mostly was using Fedora because the father of the family was a Red Hat technician, so they used Fedora, trying to get it to work. It's like, I just can't get music to play. Well, that used to be a problem with Fedora a decade ago. You could not just install Fedora and play music out of the box. It was a challenge. These days, there is no challenge with that. I mean, I pull my system up, I drop my music on there, and I push play. And there's usually a video player, an audio player, some type of player to play it. Printers, wireless adapters, Bluetooth, most of these just work completely smooth. Even the new printer, I picked up a printer at a pawn shop for $10 and plug it right into the USB port on the computer. And hey, I found a new printer. Hey, would you like to print a test page? Yep. There it went. No problem. I have a wonderful little Epson portable scanner that I use around the office here in the van, and no drivers needed. There are drivers available for Linux, but I don't have to use them. In fact, the recent updates in Linux Mint made using the onboard Linux Mint drivers actually work better than the provided drivers from the manufacturer, which is kind of funny. There are massive online communities to answer any questions, and for most of the daily needs, Linux just works. So what has been my experiences? Let me tell you that for the most part, Linux does not waste your time. I am a guy, I do not have hours to be sitting here tinkering with my system. I want to get in here, turn on my system, and get it to work. Let me run you through some of the issues that I've encountered and how I resolved them. These are the only things that took a little bit of time and research. First, I didn't write this one in my notes. I'll go and tell you about it. As I was traveling across Tennessee, booted up my computer, and the thing wouldn't boot. Oh dear, what was going on? Well, in that case, as I properly diagnosed the first time, it was just a dead CMOS battery. The CMOS battery died, the BIOS reset, and it basically forgot where the boot sector was on the system because it was a more complicated system because this whole thing is encrypted. So I simply replaced the CMOS battery with an extra battery I had laying around, went into the BIOS and simply told it where to find that boot file again, and boom, started right up. No problems at all. So that really wasn't an issue. That same computer running Endeavour OS, a version of Arch, has actually had a few times where you couldn't install something. Usually it's just needing to manually update the keyring. Now there is a GUI system I could do to manage all that, like Pomok, but for the most part, I just found if I had Pomok installed, it just wasn't regularly used for me. So I got rid of it, and I just do everything in the command line because, as I said, doing updates and package installs in the command line is generally a lot easier. So fixing the keyring and maybe removing a rogue package here or two, those are the only issues, but that is also with an Arch system, which I would not recommend you start with. I did have one issue with a Linux Mint computer where, because of such a small hard drive, it only had a 256 gigabyte hard drive on it, and it was encrypted. It relegated the boot partition a little too small, and it could only have like 2 or 3 kernels installed at any given time. And you have to understand that every time you update your system and update your kernel, it would update the kernel, and it wouldn't always remove the old kernels, which is a bug that Linux Mint has fixed. But for a while I had to manually remove some of those old kernels so that I would clear everything up. That actually took a little bit of time to solve, but once I solved that, it wasn't a problem. Again, how much time did I spend on that? 20 minutes of research. 20 minutes of research. Migrating the OS, this is the one I said I'd tell you a little bit more about later. When I went for that old Dell computer into the MSI computer, this was the only one I had that actually took a few days to solve. And this had to do with the fact that I built a computer under the old way of booting a computer, that is your basic input-output system, your BIOS. And the modern Intel processors do not support BIOS, which I didn't actually know. You learn new things as you're researching this. So effectively, I simply had to convert the boot sequence from looking for BIOS to looking for UEFI. By the way, try doing that with Windows. It's not happening. You're wiping your system and you're reinstalling everything. On this, I literally had to, I did a little bit of research, found what I needed to do, plugged the system in, ran a command. It took 20 minutes, and booyah. Whole system works perfectly fine. I literally cloned my entire drive. I didn't reinstall on a new computer and port my data. I simply took the old operating system with all of the settings, all of the files, everything exactly where it was, and I simply took the drive out of one computer and put it into the other and made it work. That's the only thing I've ever done on Linux that took some time. So let's talk about the honest truth here with Linux, the learning curve. Yes, Linux feels different at first. It's like if you're an Android user switching to iPhone or an iPhone user switching to Android. It takes you a while to get used to it. Try switching from Photoshop to GIMP or from GIMP to Photoshop. Both of them are very, very powerful editors. Both of them can do almost the exact same things, but the menus are a little bit different and the way you do things are a little bit different. And so because of this, what ends up happening here is people just, if you're already diligent, proficient in Photoshop, you boot up GIMP, this thing just sucks. And then you go on a campaign about how stupid GIMP is. I got news for you. I'm proficient in both of them. The learning curve for GIMP was way smaller than Photoshop because I already was an expert in Photoshop. Once I use it, I couldn't imagine going back to Photoshop. It's easy, it's intuitive, especially with the GIMP 3.0 that just came out. They've resolved a lot of the issues. The point is, you just take the time to learn. It's not hard work, and it doesn't even take a lot of time. The reality is, some people just don't want to do basic research. Just look at a recent video I did. The weekly news roundup from last week, I was talking about the Shopper Club programs and how difficult those were. And I had remembered as I was recording the video, so it wasn't in my notes, I remembered the story about the 17-year-old girl who Target was sending her pregnancy-related advertising. And her father gets all really mad, goes into the local Target with these advertisements and demands to know why they think the 17-year-old daughter is pregnant. Somebody leaves a comment saying, that just sounds like a wives' tale or an urban legend. You want to provide a link for that? Here's what I did. I went to whatever random search engine. I think I did that on the Brave browser because I simply go into the Brave search engine. I type in Target, 17-year-old, pregnancy, advertisements. First link is a Forbes.com article. I think Forbes.com is probably not going to report on an urban legend. Verified story, Forbes.com, talk about the dangers, what happened with that. Why did that person say, well, I just think you're giving us urban legends? Why don't you go to the search engine, type in a simple query and find the article. Rather than, which literally would take you less time than writing a comment on my YouTube channel. You see, and I was happy to do it because I remembered it and I want to make sure, oh, did I get the reference right the first time? Because I reported on that years ago, of course. We're about a decade old story now. And so, lo and behold, it's not an urban legend. I very politely posted the link to it without any extra commentary, but that's the level of research we are not even willing to do anymore. We're not even willing to go to a basic search engine and search up something. If I say something in this video and you think it's wrong, rather than sitting here and yelling at me about prove it, and I see that a lot, prove it, why don't you prove I'm wrong? Why don't you go to a search engine, look up some counterpoint, and present to me a counterpoint? You see, that's the level of research. Is that hard to do? No. The reality is, unfortunately, most people don't want to do basic, simple work like that. And as long as you're not willing to do basic, simple work, you're going to be stuck with the data harvesting systems. You're going to be stuck using the passkeys that they hoist upon you. You're going to be stuck with them having access to all their files. You're going to be stuck with you being the perfect authenticated user for everything on that computer. They're going to save a record of everything so that when it happens to be illegal, what you might be doing, they have all of the record and the data points to come and get you. Okay? And I'm not even saying you should do something wrong. I'm just saying you happen to believe a religion that the current people in power disagree with. That's it, man. Okay? I'm just talking some basics here. What I do on my computer is my business. And that is the framework by which we're doing this. So if you spend just a little tiny bit of time looking at Linux once, it will save you hours later on. Now, many users say their biggest surprise isn't how hard Linux is, it's how smooth it runs once it is set up. So going back full circle, the meme does indeed hurt new users. The meme makes Linux sound hard and it blocks some people from very good and fast tech that is free from privacy nightmares and the big tech data collection. So new users who try Linux often find it much easier than the old stereotypes suggest. So don't let those old stories keep you from something. Remember that comment that was used that we talked about? That was 1998. We are coming up on 30 years. Think of how archaic anything was 30 years ago, guys. Y'all were still using VCRs, okay? If you even know what that thing is. You probably had a greater chance of having a portable tape player than you had a CD player, let alone an MP3 player. All right. These are the things that have changed over the years. So what should you do? You should get started. Try out Linux on a USB stick, just in live mode. Don't even try and install it. I recommend Ventoy to start. Now, I did receive an email the other day. I am going to follow up. If you're listening and you sent me that email, I will follow up with you as soon as I get the chance. Ventoy may have some questionable roots. I don't know. I was presented with that possibility. I haven't seen the evidence, but still at this time, I'm still recommending Ventoy. It's easy to set up whether you're on Windows or Mac. You can easily set up a Ventoy drive and test out a variety of different Linux distributions very easily. I would recommend Linux Mint for the smoothest start, so you can go and watch our comprehensive guide on Linux Mint. Watch a few of them. Watch from my videos, watch other people's videos as well. Get a chance to have a feel for it before you even install it. So, you might see something, oh, that's how you install software. Oh, that's how you change your settings and appearances. Do that, and then you can join some Linux forums, Discords. Of course, we have a Matrix server at switchedtolinux. I think our mods have it set to invite only right now, so you might need to send me an email first. Because we've had some people trying to do abuse and crap on our Matrix server. So you can thank the bad actors for closing it down, but we are very open to opening that up for people. We just need a little bit of notification. You can contact me or actually Ivan as well. So as far as this goes, just kind of wrapping up here, the fact that the old meme, the old statement that Linux takes too much time, it is outdated and does not match the modern reality of Linux. Modern Linux saves a lot of time, puts you in control, and is very easy to use. So go ahead and give it a shot. Linux might surprise you. If you like this type of content, leave a like down below and leave us a comment. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. And I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.